You live in the most privileged era humanity has ever known, but you are more restless than your grandparents ever were, with considerably less stability and far more strife. If you have everything you desired but still feel that something is missing, this is not a sign of weakness or ingratitude. It is a design element of the environment you grew up in. Viktor Frankl called this feeling the existential vacuum, the silent emptiness modern life quietly trains you to feel. Schools taught you algebra and grammar, but they never once sat you down and explained why you exist or how to build a life that actually matters to you. They handed you tools to succeed in a system, but forgot to mention what the system was even for. You learned how to get a job, how to follow rules, how to optimize your productivity, but nobody taught you how to answer the question that wakes you up at 3 in the morning. What is all of this for? What Frankl discovered wasn't just about survival. The discovery cut deeper into what makes a human life worth living. He watched people who had every reason to give up, find something deeper than ease or pleasure to live for. He saw that the human soul doesn't collapse from suffering. The collapse comes from meaninglessness. And when he looked at the modern world, he saw a different kind of prison, one with no visible walls, no guards, but just as capable of draining people of their reason to live. This exploration will show you exactly why modern life manufactures this hollowness, how schools and society conditioned you to feel this way, and what Frankl's insights reveal about reclaiming a life that feels meaningful again. You'll see why chasing happiness makes you miserable, why your discomfort might be the most honest thing about you, and how the cure for this void isn't more convenience. The cure demands more meaning. The system you grew up in was never designed to help you find meaning. The design made you functional. You were taught to sit still, memorize facts, pass tests, and move on to the next grade like products moving down an assembly line. You learned that success meant checking boxes, good grades, college acceptance, stable job, respectable income. But nowhere in that curriculum was there a single lesson on how to know what you actually want from life, or why you should want anything. The entire structure assumed that once you had security and ease, fulfillment would naturally follow like rain after thunder. That assumption was a lie. Frankl saw this hollowness spreading like a disease through modern society, not because people were suffering too much, but because they were not suffering for anything that mattered. When you reduce existence to ease and consumption, the soul begins to starve like a plant kept in darkness. Think about how you were conditioned to relate to discomfort. Every time you felt bored in class, every time you questioned why you had to learn something irrelevant, every time you wondered what the point of all this effort was, you were told to stop complaining and just do what was asked. The message was clear. Your feelings don't matter. Your questions don't matter. Just comply and you'll be rewarded later. But that reward never addressed the deeper question beating beneath your ribs. You got the degree, the job, the apartment, and the weekend plans, and still the hollowness remained because no one ever taught you that meaning isn't something you achieve. Meaning is something you choose. Frankl understood this when he realized that people who survived the hardest moments were not always the strongest or healthiest. They were the ones who had something beyond themselves to live for. A wife waiting at home, a book they needed to finish, a mission they hadn't completed yet. Meaning gave them a reason to endure what seemed unendurable, and the absence of meaning made even convenient lives feel like slow suffocation. The world's perspective on what makes life valuable has fundamentally changed. Your grandparents were aware that they were prepared to make sacrifices for their loved ones or something greater than themselves. However, at some point, the word sacrifice became an abomination, and the focus shifted to what may be obtained without making any sacrifices. You wake up, check your phone, switch between tasks, occupy your hours with diversions and activities, and then fall asleep without thinking about why you did anything. The days blend together because nothing in them requires you to be more than a functional body, not because they are difficult. Frankl discovered something schools never mention. Boredom and discomfort are not obstacles to meaning. They're the birth canal of the truth you're avoiding. When you sit with boredom, when you endure discomfort without distraction, you're forced to confront the question of what actually matters to you. The existential vacuum only becomes visible when you stop numbing the ache like a dentist's needle wearing off. That's why so many people feel most hollow after their biggest achievements, the promotion, the vacation, the purchase they saved for months to afford. The distraction ends, and the question returns like a bill collector at your door. Frankl saw this pattern repeat in his clinical work like a song stuck on repeat. Patients came to him with every material advantage, wealth, health, and status, but they felt dead inside. He called this Sunday neurosis, the depression that strikes when the workday's distractions fade and people are left alone with themselves like actors without a script. They had built lives around avoiding pain, but a life built around avoidance is just a slower kind of dying. Schools prepared you for this by training you to be a good employee, a good consumer, a good participant in systems that don't care whether your life feels meaningful. You were taught to measure success by external markers like salary, title, or possessions, but never by the internal question, does this life reflect what I actually value? That question was too dangerous because the answer might lead you to reject the entire script you were handed like a bad play. The system needed you producing, not questioning whether production itself has any meaning beyond keeping you too busy to notice the void. Frankl's answer to the existential vacuum wasn't to find happiness. The answer was to find responsibility. He believed that the question isn't what you want from life, but what life wants from you. This flips everything schools taught you like a table overturned in anger. You were raised to think of yourself as the center, your dreams, your goals, your happiness, your success. But Frankl saw that this self-focus is exactly what creates the vacuum. When you make yourself the sole reference point, when every decision revolves around maximizing your pleasure or minimizing your pain, you become trapped in a loop that can never satisfy, like a dog chasing its own tail. The more you chase happiness directly, the more the feeling retreats like a shadow you're trying to catch. The more you try to fill the void with achievements or possessions or experiences, the more hollow you feel. This happens because meaning doesn't come from what you take from the world. Meaning comes from what you give back, like breath exchanged between lungs and air. Look at the moments in your life when you felt most alive. They were not the moments of pure ease or indulgence. They were the moments when you were needed, when you contributed something that mattered, when you pushed through difficulty for someone or something beyond yourself. Maybe staying up all night to help a friend through a crisis, or finishing a project that demanded everything you had, or caring for someone who couldn't care for themselves. Those moments carried importance because they had purpose, like an anchor holding a ship steady. Frankl called this self-transcendence, the act of moving beyond your own concerns towards something larger. Schools never taught you this because self-transcendence doesn't fit neatly into a grading system. You can't measure the concept on a test or put the experience on a resume. But self-transcendence is the only thing that actually fills the existential vacuum, like water rushing into a dry riverbed. The world around you offers 1,000 substitutes, and every single one leads to the same empty room you're trying to escape. You're told to buy this, achieve that, optimize the other thing, and happiness will follow like a faithful dog. But Frankl saw through this promise because he knew that meaning doesn't come from accumulation. Meaning comes from dedication to something that matters more than your own convenience. You're told that meaning comes from finding your passion, expressing your authentic self. But these phrases are just repackaged versions of the same self-focus that created the hollowness in the first place. Frankl warned against this relentless inward gaze because turning life into a never-ending therapy session where you're always analyzing yourself, always trying to discover who you really are, always waiting to feel complete before you start living, this creates paralysis. But meaning isn't discovered through introspection. Meaning is created through action. You don't find your purpose and then live according to the discovery. You live, and through living with intention and responsibility, purpose reveals itself like a path appearing under your feet as you walk. The woodworker doesn't sit around contemplating the meaning of woodwork. He picks up the tools and builds, and through building, the meaning emerges like smoke from fire. Schools won't tell you that this hollow feeling you carry might be the most important signal your soul can send. That feeling that something is wrong, that you're squandering your life, that there must be more than this. That's not depression that can be cured or distracted from. That's your deepest self recognizing that you're living out of alignment with what matters, like a compass needle spinning wildly. Frankl saw the existential vacuum not as a disease but as a call, an invitation to stop sleepwalking through a script someone else wrote and start authoring a life that reflects your actual values. The question isn't how to make this hollowness go away. The question is what this feeling is trying to tell you about how you're living right now. What responsibility are you avoiding? What contribution are you capable of that you're not making? What struggle would give your life weight if you chose to face the challenge? Modern life feels hollow because you were taught to build a life around convenience instead of meaning, around achievement instead of purpose, around self-focus instead of self-transcendence. The education system prepared you to fit into structures that don't ask whether your soul is alive, only whether you're productive enough to keep the machine running. But Frankl's insight cuts through all of that noise. You don't need to wait for permission or enlightenment or the perfect circumstances to live meaningfully. You need to recognize that life is already asking something of you, right now, in this moment. This hollowness isn't the end of the story. This feeling is the beginning of the only question that matters. Not what can the world give you, but what can you give that only you can give. That's where the vacuum ends and life begins. That's where schools failed you and where you can finally stop failing yourself.